Have you ever felt like you've given everything, your time, your energy, your love, only to be met with silence, dismissal, or worse, indifference from the very people you raised? Maybe it's your children. Maybe they're grown now, with their own lives, their own problems, and somehow, you've become just a background character in their story. You text them and get a one-word answer. You call and it goes to voicemail. You offer help, but they say they've got it under control, and not always kindly. It hurts, doesn't it? You spent decades putting them first. You stayed up at night when they were sick, clapped at every school play, helped them move 5 times in 10 years. And now you feel like a ghost in their world, visible only when convenient, audible only when they need something. You start to wonder, what if I just stopped? What if I stopped texting, stopped calling, stopped trying so hard to stay in their orbit? That idea might feel scary at first. Silence feels like giving up. But let me tell you something, silence isn't weakness, it's strength. And sometimes, silence is the only language left when love and effort go unappreciated. It's not punishment, it's self-respect. Today I want to talk with you about something powerful. Not a strategy to fix your kids, not a way to win them back, but a deeper understanding of what happens when you stop filling every gap, when you go silent. Because when you step back, the silence speaks volumes. It becomes the mirror they can't ignore. Let's walk through what your children may go through when you finally stop trying, not to be cold, but to protect your peace. There are stages they go through, and understanding them might just give you the clarity and comfort you've been looking for. Let's start with the very first thing that happens when you go silent. It's not loud. It doesn't show up with fireworks or drama, but it's powerful. They realize you're really gone. At first, they might not notice. Maybe they're used to you, always being the one to reach out, to check in, to remind them that you're thinking about them. And when that stops, they might shrug it off. Mom must be busy. Dad's probably just relaxing today. But then a week goes by, then 2. No texts, no calls, no little messages checking how their day went. That's when something clicks. And let me tell you, that moment matters. Because when you've been the constant, your absence becomes louder than any words you could ever say. They start to feel the quiet. They look at their phone and realize there's no message from you waiting. They open their inbox and there's no email with a helpful link or a sweet note. The silence creates a space, and in that space, they start to notice what used to fill it. That's when stage 2 begins. And it's one you might not see directly, but you'll sense it if you're paying attention. They put on the mask of "I don't care." This is where pride kicks in, especially with adult children. Maybe they feel guilty for not calling. Maybe deep down, they realize they haven't treated you as well as they should. But instead of sitting with those feelings, they put on a show for themselves and for others. They act like your silence doesn't bother them. They tell themselves they're too busy to think about it. They convince themselves that you're the one being distant, maybe even dramatic. They might even say it to others. Mom's just doing her own thing these days. Or, Dad's finally taking a break. Good for him. It's a defense. It's armor. Because to admit that your silence hurts would be to admit they took you for granted. And here's where you need to be strong. Because this is the moment where many parents break their silence. You'll feel that little voice inside you saying, "Just check in. Just send one message. Just see how they are." You'll think maybe they're busy or stressed or something's wrong. But you must remember, you've done that before, again and again. And each time it pulled you right back into the cycle of one-sided effort. Silence is not about abandonment. It's about balance. By staying silent, you're not being cruel. You're creating the space for your child to feel the natural consequences of distance. The emotional gap that forms when love and effort are not returned. Now, let's pause for a second. Because I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they don't care at all? What if they move on without me? That fear is real, it's heavy, it can keep you up at night. But I want to tell you something that might surprise you. That mask they wear, the one that says they're fine, it gets heavy fast. It doesn't last. And when it finally starts to crack, what creeps in next is regret. Not all at once. Not in dramatic sobs or sudden apologies. Regret is quiet. It comes in during those unguarded moments, when they're making dinner and suddenly remember how you used to send them recipes. Or when they pass by a photo of you on the shelf and feel a little knot in their chest. It creeps in during the slow times, when the noise fades and the truth settles in. They start to remember, not just the recent months, but all the years you were there. All the things you gave, all the ways you showed up, all the sacrifices they didn't see or didn't want to see. And that memory, it doesn't go away. It lingers. It grows. They might not tell you this. They might not even admit it to themselves right away. But inside, there's a shift. Regret doesn't come from your silence. It comes from their own choices. Your silence just gave the truth room to breathe. And this is why you must stay grounded. Because this is not about revenge or making them feel bad. This is about reclaiming your sense of peace. Your voice has always been kind, generous, patient. But sometimes silence is the only way people really hear. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are simply choosing to stop pouring your love into a cup that refuses to be filled. And that takes courage. As regret starts to settle in, they begin to look for ways to quiet it. That's when they start reaching out, not always to you, but to others. Friends, co-workers, acquaintances, sometimes even new relationships. They go searching for comfort in other people, hoping that someone, somewhere, can fill the space that opened up when you went quiet. But here's the truth, and it's one you know deeply, if you've lived long enough. Not everyone who smiles at you can comfort you, and not every relationship is built to heal what's broken. What they're really doing is trying to find a shortcut. They want relief from the weight of what they've ignored, the warmth of your presence, your consistency, your steady love. So they might be extra social. They might talk about how great things are. They might even act happier than usual. But it's surface level, like putting a coat of paint on a cracked wall. It looks good for a little while, but eventually the truth underneath starts to show. That's when something deeper begins to shake inside them. You see, when they can no longer rely on your voice, your support, your steady presence, their emotional world starts to shift. It might not be visible at first, like they still go to work, still pay the bills, still post birthday photos online. But deep down, their inner stability is cracking. Why? Because for years they've counted on you, maybe even without realizing it. You were the safe space, the steady check-in, the one who remembered their hard days, sent messages just because, and made sure they knew someone out there still cared. Without that, things begin to feel uncertain. It's like they're walking across a bridge they thought was made of steel, and suddenly they realize it's mostly rope. They question things. They feel a little more alone than usual, even in a crowded room. They miss the small comforts they used to ignore, your advice, your gentle reminders, your belief in them, even when they didn't believe in themselves. And here's something important. This isn't about guilt-tripping your kids or hoping they suffer. That's not your heart. It never was. You love them. That's why you gave so much. But love does not mean you have to be endlessly available. Love also includes wisdom. And wisdom sometimes means stepping back and letting people feel what life is like without your constant presence. They may not say it, but this emotional shakeup, it's happening. And they know exactly when it started, when you stopped calling, when the messages stopped, when they realized you weren't going to keep being the only one trying. At this point, They're no longer just missing you. They're feeling the effects of not having you there. It's a subtle but powerful shift. And for some, it can feel like they're starting to lose their balance. Like something important is missing, but they can't fix it with a text or a quick visit. And now, here comes the hardest part for them. And honestly, sometimes the hardest for you to witness. They start struggling in the quiet without you. The noise is gone. The distractions aren't working like they used to. And when the day winds down, when the house gets quiet, when no one's texting and the world goes still, that's when it hits them. Your silence isn't just a gap in conversation. It's a mirror. It reflects back the choices they made, the effort they didn't return, the love they took for granted. They start to sit with questions, not always spoken aloud, but they're there. Why hasn't Mom called? Is Dad okay? Did I push them too far? Do they think I don't care? And those questions don't go away with busyness. In fact, the more they try to ignore them, the louder they get. That's the thing about silence. It doesn't chase, it waits. And in the waiting, it teaches. You might not see any of this. They might not post about it, won't admit it, and probably won't call you up to confess that they're feeling it. But it's there, working quietly inside them, nudging them towards something they haven't had to face before. The reality that you are a person with limits. A person who deserves love and attention. Not just because you're their parent, but because you are human. And let me just pause here to say something directly to you, from one heart to another. If you're feeling like this silence is too much, if you're wondering whether you're being selfish, if you're questioning whether they even notice, please hear this. You're not being selfish. You're being wise. There comes a time in life, especially after 60, when you start realizing your energy is sacred. Your time is limited, and your peace is priceless. You've given your love freely for years. You've been patient, forgiving, and available. Now, you're allowed to choose peace. You're allowed to step back. You're allowed to let the silence speak for you. And as your child sits in that quiet, they are learning. Slowly, painfully maybe. But they are. Now, some of them may try to distract themselves again. Others may continue to wrestle with that silence for a while. But eventually, everyone reaches a fork in the road, the place where they must choose between two very different outcomes. Some will break down, some will grow up. That moment doesn't come with a warning. It just shows up one day, maybe after they see a photo of you, or hear your voice in an old voicemail, or visit a place where they remember you always showing up for them. Suddenly, all the distractions fade, and they're left with a clear picture of what they've lost, or what they might still lose. And that clarity, that's when real change becomes possible. At this stage, your child is standing in that quiet crossroads, faced with a decision only they can make. They've sat in the stillness. They've felt the sting of absence. They've watched the distractions fall short, and now they're left with the one thing they were trying to avoid all along. The truth. Some will reach this moment and spiral. The weight of guilt, missed chances, and emotional immaturity will feel too heavy. They may shrink back, tell themselves stories that help them justify the distance, or avoid reaching out simply because they don't know how to begin. It's not always that they don't care. Sometimes it's just that they don't know how to come back from the space you've created. Others, though, they will break through. Something inside them will shift. A sense of maturity, of clarity, of humility will rise. They'll begin to see your silence not as punishment but as a signal that they've crossed a line, that maybe they've expected too much without giving enough, and that if they want a relationship with you, a real one, it will have to be built on mutual respect, not one-sided effort. This breakthrough might not happen overnight. Growth never does. But you'll start to feel it. Maybe in the way they reach out. Slower, more intentional. Maybe in the words they choose. Softer, more respectful. You'll sense it not in their apology, but in their consistency. in the way they begin to show up without prompting, in the way they listen instead of explain. Because that's what real change looks like. It's quiet, steady, and earned. And here's where your strength will matter most. Not the strength to hold the silence anymore, you've done that. But the strength to receive what's real, to recognize sincerity when it comes, to decide not from guilt or habit, but from wisdom, whether you're open to rebuilding or whether you've truly moved on. See, by this point, the journey has stopped being about them. It's become yours. It's no longer about whether they call, whether they text, or whether they notice you're missing. It's about how deeply you've come to value your own peace. It's about the space you've made in your life for calm mornings, meaningful conversations, and people who see you, hear you, and love you back. You've learned that your time is precious, that your energy deserves to go where it's returned, and that your voice, even when quiet, carries power. And here's the beautiful thing. Whether your child comes back with a heart full of gratitude and new perspective, or whether they continue down a path of avoidance, you've already won. You've stepped into your own light. You've stopped shrinking to keep the peace. And in doing so, you've given yourself something that many people never find: the freedom to live without begging for love. Now let me speak directly to you, heart to heart. If you've been carrying around that old ache, that weight of was I too harsh, or did I give up too soon, let it go. You didn't stop loving them. You stopped chasing them. And there's a world of difference between the two. Stopping the chase doesn't mean you closed your heart. It means you opened your hands. Let go of the need to control, to convince, to constantly prove your worth. And in doing that, you made room for something better: honesty, peace, self-respect. It's not easy, especially when you're a parent, because love doesn't retire. Even when they grow up, even when they forget to call, your heart still remembers every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every tear you wiped away. That love never leaves. But now it gets to be balanced. Now it gets to include you. You've spent so much of your life putting others first. And maybe you still do in small ways, because that's who you are. But the lesson of this silence, the quiet strength you've shown, is that your needs matter too. Your feelings matter, your presence matters. If your child finds their way back to you, not just physically but emotionally, let them earn that space. Let them show you that they've grown. But never again should your love come at the cost of your peace. And if they don't come back, if they keep pretending, keep distancing, keep filling their world with noise to drown out what they lost, then let that be your confirmation, not your regret. Because you now know what kind of love you deserve. The kind that doesn't need reminders, the kind that listens, the kind that shows up. Before we wrap up, I want to offer you one final reminder, one that you can carry with you from this day forward. You are not responsible for anyone else's emotional maturity. You are not the fixer of their silence. You are not the bridge they keep walking over but never helping to repair. You are a person of worth, of depth, of kindness. And your silence was never meant to hurt, but to heal you. So take a moment, close your eyes, and say this with me, quietly or out loud. I choose peace. I choose self-respect. I choose to love myself as deeply as I've loved others. And if you meant it, even just a little, then know this: you are already becoming someone stronger than you were yesterday. Now, if this video spoke to you, even a single line, I want to invite you to do something simple. Scroll down to the comments and just write, I am choosing peace today. That's it. No long explanation. No need to justify your choice. Just that small sentence. Because you never know who else might read it and realize they're not alone. And if you feel like this message could help someone else, another parent, a friend, even one of your kids, share the video. We never know what words will make the difference. Also, if you haven't already, click the like button. It helps others find this space, a space where healing and hope live. And subscribe to Strong Elderly Life if you'd like more gentle, honest conversations like this one. Thank you for spending this time with me. I don't take it lightly. You've come through something hard, and you've come through with grace. That's no small thing. Here's to living your best life. Not someday, but now. With peace, with strength, with your head held high. You are more than enough. Always have been. Always will be.